I'm Morgan, 29, and I thought I knew what I was getting into when I fell in love with Ethan. We had the perfect relationship until I met his wealthy family 3 months before our wedding. That's when his parents handed me a detailed spreadsheet with a $3,000 monthly family contribution requirement and a schedule for walking their show poodle. At first, I thought it was a joke or some bizarre test. Little did I know this was just the beginning of their demands. Before I tell you how I handled this bizarre pre-wedding demand, drop a comment about where you're watching from and subscribe if you've ever dealt with difficult in-laws. Growing up in a middle-class family in Minnesota, I never imagined I'd one day be entangled with one of the wealthiest families in Boston. I had been working as a physical therapist for 5 years, helping patients recover from injuries and surgeries. It was rewarding work that I loved, even if it didn't make me rich. I met Ethan at my college roommate's 30th birthday party. He was tall, with kind eyes and an easy laugh that made everyone feel comfortable. While most guys at the party talked about their expensive cars or fancy job titles, Ethan asked thoughtful questions and actually listened to my answers. We bonded over our shared love of hiking, true crime podcasts, and terrible reality TV shows. By the end of the night, I knew there was something special between us. Our first date was a disaster in the best possible way. We had planned a picnic in the park, but a sudden downpour forced us to take shelter in a tiny coffee shop. We ended up sitting there for hours, talking about everything from our childhood dreams to our biggest fears. When he drove me home, he didn't try to kiss me, just squeezed my hand and said he couldn't wait to see me again. Over the next 2 years, our relationship flourished. We supported each other through career challenges, my promotion to senior therapist and his stressful project deadlines as a software engineer. We took weekend trips to the mountains, adopted a rescue cat named Milo, and eventually moved in together. Ethan was my best friend, my confidant, and the person who made even mundane Tuesday evenings feel special. When Ethan mentioned his family, he always described them as traditional and big on family values. He said they owned a family business but never elaborated much beyond that. Looking back, I should have pressed for more details, but I was so wrapped up in our bubble of happiness that I didn't think it mattered. The proposal came during a sunset hike on our 2nd anniversary. At the summit, Ethan got down on one knee with a vintage emerald ring that had belonged to his grandmother. "Morgan, you're the most authentic person I've ever met," he said, voice shaking slightly. "I want to build a life with you, if you'll have me." I said yes through tears, and we spent the evening calling friends and family to share the news. I was especially excited about joining Ethan's family. Having lost both my parents in a car accident when I was in college, I had always yearned for that sense of belonging to a larger family unit. Ethan had 2 siblings, Bradley and Allison, who he spoke of fondly, and parents who had been married for 35 years. It sounded like the stable family I had been missing. The first warning sign came when I suggested we visit his family to announce our engagement in person. Ethan's face fell slightly before he covered it with a smile. "We should probably wait until they're back from their trip to Europe," he said vaguely. Another month passed before he finally arranged a meeting, growing increasingly anxious as the date approached. "My parents can be particular," he warned me the night before our visit. "Just be yourself, but maybe a slightly more formal version of yourself?" I laughed it off. "Are they royalty or something?" I joked, but Ethan didn't laugh. "They just have certain expectations," he said, not meeting my eyes. "It's how they were raised." Still, I remained optimistic. I spent hours choosing the perfect outfit, a navy blue dress that was professional but not stuffy, with pearl earrings that had belonged to my mother. I wanted to make a good impression, not just for Ethan's sake but because I genuinely wanted a relationship with my future in-laws. The morning of our visit, Ethan was unusually quiet during the 2-hour drive to his family home. As we approached the gates, yes, actual gates, he turned to me with an intensity one rarely saw. "Morgan, no matter what happens today, remember that I love you. That's the only thing that matters." Before I could ask what he meant, he was punching in the gate code, and we were driving up a winding driveway toward a house that looked more like a small hotel than a family home. You never told me your family was this wealthy, I whispered, suddenly feeling underdressed despite my careful preparations. Ethan shrugged uncomfortably. It's just money. It doesn't change who they are as people. I would soon discover how wrong he was about that. The Harrison family estate sprawled across what must have been at least 5 acres of perfectly manicured lawn. The mansion itself was an imposing colonial-style building with white columns and black shutters, looking like something out of a historical film. As we crunched up the gravel driveway, I noticed a gardener trimming hedges with mathematical precision and a housekeeper visible through the window, arranging flowers in the foyer. Home sweet home, Ethan muttered with what sounded suspiciously like sarcasm as he parked his modest Toyota beside a gleaming Bentley and a Mercedes SUV. The massive front door swung open before we even reached it, revealing a tall, slender woman with silver-streaked blonde hair pulled into an immaculate chignon. She wore camel-colored slacks and a cream cashmere sweater with a single strand of pearls. Everything about her seemed calculated, from her neutral-toned makeup to her barely-there smile. "Ethan, darling," she said, air-kissing both his cheeks. "And you must be Morgan." Her eyes swept over me with the thoroughness of a quality control inspector. I felt every flaw magnified under her gaze: a loose thread on my dress, a scuff on my shoe, the fact that my pearl earrings were probably cultured rather than natural. "It's lovely to meet you, Mrs. Harrison," I said, extending my hand. "Stephanie, please," she corrected, her handshake brief and cool. "Richard is in his study but will join us shortly. Do come in." The interior of the house was even more impressive than the exterior. The ceiling soared 2 stories high in the entryway, with a crystal chandelier that probably cost more than my student loans. Every surface gleamed, every object seemed curated rather than simply owned. "What a beautiful home," I said, genuinely impressed. "Thank you. It's been in Richard's family for 3 generations, Stephanie replied. "We've updated it, of course, while preserving its historical integrity." She led us to a sitting room where 2 younger people waited, a man and woman who had to be Bradley and Allison. Bradley, the older brother, rose to greet us with a warmth that seemed almost out of place in the formal setting. He had Ethan's kind eyes but looked more weathered somehow, with slight circles under his eyes and a tightness around his mouth. "The famous Morgan, finally," he said, giving me a genuine smile. "Ethan hasn't shut up about you for 2 years." Allison, the younger sister, approached more cautiously. She was petite and stylish in a way that suggested effort rather than natural inclination, like she was trying to fulfill an expectation. "Welcome," she said simply, giving me a quick hug that felt almost conspiratorial. "I'm so glad you're here." Just as we were settling onto stiff-backed couches with glasses of iced tea, a commanding figure entered the room. Richard Harrison had clearly been handsome in his youth and had aged into a distinguished-looking man with salt-and-pepper hair and piercing blue eyes that missed nothing. Unlike his wife's subtle scrutiny, his assessment of me was nakedly evaluative. "So this is the physical therapist," he said instead of a greeting, emphasizing my profession in a way that made it sound like an exotic species. "Morgan," I corrected gently, standing to shake his hand. "It's nice to meet you, Mr. Harrison." "Richard," he replied automatically, though it didn't sound like an invitation to familiarity. Dinner was served in a formal dining room with seating for 16, though there were only 6 of us. The conversation felt like navigating a minefield. Every innocent question I answered seemed to reveal some deficiency in my background or character. "Where did you attend university?" Richard asked as the first course was served. "Minnesota State," I replied. "They have an excellent physical therapy program." Was his only response, but the slight raising of his eyebrows spoke volumes. It clearly wasn't Harvard or Yale. "And your parents?" Stephanie inquired, delicately spearing a piece of asparagus. "What do they do?" The question stung, as it always did. "They passed away while I was in college. My father was a high school science teacher, and my mother was a nurse." "Oh, how dreadful for you," Stephanie said with practiced sympathy that didn't reach her eyes. "No siblings either?" "No, just me," I said, wishing Ethan would jump in. But he seemed to have transformed into someone I barely recognized, quiet, deferential, with none of his usual easy confidence. "And what are your thoughts on family planning?" Richard asked bluntly, causing me to nearly choke on my water. "Father," Ethan finally spoke up, "we haven't discussed that in detail yet." "Well, you should," Richard said firmly. "Family planning is financial planning, after all." Before I could respond to this bizarre statement, a sharp bark interrupted the conversation. A standard poodle with an elaborate grooming cut pranced into the dining room, heading straight for Richard. "Winston," Stephanie called, but the dog ignored her, placing his paws on Richard's lap. "The best-bred standard poodle in Massachusetts," Richard informed me, scratching behind the dog's ears. "Champion bloodlines. We show him occasionally, though it's more Stephanie's hobby than mine." Winston turned his attention to me, sniffing my hand suspiciously before allowing me to pet him. "He seems to like you," Allison observed. "That's unusual. Winston is very particular." "Like owner, like dog," Bradley muttered under his breath, earning a sharp look from his father. The rest of the evening continued in the same vein, polite on the surface but with undercurrents of judgment and unspoken expectations. I noticed how Ethan kept glancing at his father for approval, how Bradley seemed to be drinking more wine than was prudent, how Allison barely spoke unless addressed directly. As coffee and dessert were served, Stephanie turned to me with what appeared to be a genuine smile, though it didn't reach her eyes. "Morgan, we'd love for you to join us for our family business discussion tomorrow. It's time you understood what marrying into the Harrison family truly means." I nodded, relieved that they were finally going to explain the mysterious family business. "I'd like that very much." Bradley shot me a look I couldn't quite interpret, while Allison suddenly found her dessert fascinating. Ethan squeezed my hand under the table, but whether in reassurance or warning, I couldn't tell. That night, in the cavernous guest room with its antique four-poster bed, I tried to make sense of the evening. "Your family is intense," I said to Ethan as we got ready for bed. "They're just protective," he replied, not meeting my eyes. "Once they get to know you, they'll love you as much as I do." But as I drifted off to sleep, I couldn't shake the feeling that I had just passed through the looking glass into a world where the rules were different, and no one had bothered to give me the handbook. Breakfast the following morning was a tense affair. I'd slept poorly, unsettled by the previous day's interactions and the unfamiliar surroundings. The enormous guest bed had been comfortable enough, but I'd tossed and turned, replaying conversations and analyzing facial expressions until dawn began to filter through the heavy curtains. Stephanie was already in the breakfast room when Ethan and I came downstairs, dressed in tennis whites despite the chilly spring weather. She was reading something on an iPad while sipping black coffee. "Good morning," she said, glancing up briefly. "There's coffee in the carafe, and Marguerite can prepare whatever you'd like for breakfast." I hadn't realized there was a cook as well as a housekeeper. "Just coffee is fine for now, thank you," I said, pouring myself a cup. Ethan, more familiar with the routine, asked Marguerite for eggs and toast. We sat in awkward silence until Bradley shuffled in, looking slightly hungover. "Morning, troops," he muttered, heading straight for the coffee. He gave me a sympathetic smile that suggested he knew something I didn't. Allison arrived next, already dressed for the day in a casual but clearly expensive outfit. She took a seat beside me. "Sleep well?" she asked quietly. "Not really," I admitted. She nodded as if this confirmed something. "The first night is always the hardest." Before I could ask what she meant, Richard entered the room with Winston trotting at his heels. He was dressed in a crisp button-down and slacks, looking as if he was heading to an important meeting rather than having breakfast with family. 9 o'clock in my study, he announced without preamble. "We have matters to discuss." The statement seemed directed at everyone, but his eyes lingered on me. I nodded, trying to project confidence I didn't feel. After a breakfast where conversation remained stilted and superficial, I followed Ethan to Richard's study. It was exactly as I'd imagined: dark wood paneling, leather-bound books, and a massive desk that positioned its occupant as the unquestionable authority in the room. Richard sat behind it, with Stephanie standing at his shoulder like a sentinel. Bradley and Allison were already seated in leather armchairs arranged in front of the desk. Ethan and I took the remaining seats. I felt like I was about to be interviewed or perhaps interrogated. "Morgan," Richard began, folding his hands on the desk. "As Stephanie mentioned last night, it's important that you understand what marrying into this family entails. We are not just individuals but part of a legacy that spans generations." He pressed a button on his desk phone. "Sandra, bring in the FCS documents, please." A moment later, his assistant entered with a leather portfolio, which she handed to Richard before quietly exiting. "The Harrison family operates under what we call the family contribution system," Richard continued, removing several papers from the portfolio. "It ensures that our collective interests are maintained and that everyone contributes appropriately to the family's continued success." He slid a spreadsheet across the desk toward me. At first glance, it appeared to be a complex financial document with multiple columns and calculations. As I looked more closely, I realized it was detailing expected monetary contributions from various family members. "Each member of the Harrison family contributes to our shared resources according to their means," Stephanie explained, her voice crisp and businesslike. "This supports our philanthropic endeavors, maintains family properties, and ensures our social standing." I scanned the document, my eyes widening as I saw the figures. Bradley, $8,000 monthly. Allison, $6,500 monthly. Ethan, $5,000 monthly. And there, in a column with my name on it, $3,000 monthly. "I don't understand," I said, looking up in confusion. "You expect me to pay $3,000 to the family every month? For what exactly?" Richard's expression suggested my question was both naive and slightly offensive. "For the privilege of being a Harrison," he stated as if it were obvious. "For access to our network, use of the family properties, inclusion in social events that will advance your career and standing. The contribution is adjusted based on your current income, of course. As your earnings increase, so will your responsibility to the family." I stared at him, then at Ethan, waiting for someone to laugh and reveal this was an elaborate joke. No one did. "There's more," Stephanie added, passing me another document. This one was a weekly schedule with my name at the top. "These are the expected duties for each family member." I scanned the list in disbelief. "Monday and Thursday, walk Winston, morning and evening. Tuesday, assist with Harrison Family Foundation correspondence. Wednesday, family dinner, mandatory attendance. Friday, support for Stephanie's charity committee as needed. Monthly, attendance at minimum 2 social/philanthropic events as Harrison family representative. These responsibilities will naturally expand once you and Ethan have children," Stephanie continued. "We maintain high standards for Harrison children, with specific educational and extracurricular expectations." My mind was reeling. I looked at Bradley and Allison, searching for some indication that this was unusual. Their faces revealed nothing, though Bradley wouldn't meet my eyes. "This is a lot to take in," I said carefully, buying time to process. "I wasn't aware of any of this." "It's quite standard," Richard dismissed. "Every family has expectations. Ours are simply more formalized." I turned to Ethan, who had remained conspicuously silent. "Did you know about this? That I would be expected to pay into a family fund?" He shifted uncomfortably. "I meant to bring it up, but I wanted you to meet everyone first. It's not as complicated as it sounds. Everyone contributes." "But I can't afford $3,000 a month," I said bluntly. "My student loans alone are nearly $1,000, and my salary as a physical therapist." "Perhaps you should consider advancement opportunities," Stephanie interrupted smoothly. "Or supplementary income sources. Allison teaches yoga in addition to her gallery work." Allison's tight smile told me this wasn't entirely by choice. "What happens if I don't contribute?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. The temperature in the room seemed to drop several degrees. "That's not an option," Richard stated flatly. "All Harrisons contribute. It's how we've maintained our position for generations." I'm not a Harrison yet, I pointed out, my voice small but firm. But you will be, Stephanie countered. And preparations must begin now. The wedding is only 3 months away. I looked again at Bradley, whose expression had darkened. Something clicked in my mind. Was your wife part of this system too? I asked him directly. A flash of pain crossed his face. Ex-wife, he corrected quietly. And yes, she was. Stephanie cleared her throat. Miranda simply wasn't suited to the responsibilities of our family. Some people lack the necessary commitment. The implication was crystal clear: conform or be cast out. We'll need your first contribution by the end of the month, Richard continued as if the matter were settled. Sandra will help you set up the automatic transfer. And Winston's walking schedule begins tomorrow morning. 6 a.m. sharp. He requires exactly 45 minutes of exercise. I sat there, feeling as if I'd been ambushed. This wasn't joining a family, this was signing a contract. Being recruited into a corporation where love was secondary to obligation. I'll need time to think about this, I finally managed. Of course, Richard said magnanimously. You have until Friday. 3 days. He was giving me 3 days to decide whether to commit to financial servitude to people who had shown me nothing but cool judgment since I arrived. As we left the study, Ethan squeezed my hand. It'll be okay, he whispered. We'll talk about it later. But the expression on his face told a different story. He wasn't surprised or outraged on my behalf. He was worried I might not accept the terms. And that realization hurt more than anything Richard or Stephanie had said. The moment our bedroom door closed behind us, I turned to Ethan. What the hell was that? I demanded, my voice shaking. $3,000 a month? Dog walking duties? Were you ever going to tell me about any of this? Ethan ran a hand through his hair, a gesture I'd always found endearing but now seemed like a stalling tactic. I was going to bring it up gradually. It sounds worse than it is when it's all laid out at once like that. Worse than it is? I repeated incredulously. Ethan, they're treating me like an employee, not family. And an underpaid one at that. They treat everyone like that, he said defensively. I pay $5,000 a month. Bradley pays even more. And that doesn't strike you as bizarre? Your parents are clearly wealthy. Why do they need their children to pay them? It's not about need, Ethan explained, sitting heavily on the edge of the bed. It's about commitment to the family. Showing that you value being a Harrison. By putting a literal price tag on it? I paced the room, trying to make sense of this. How long have you been paying them? Ethan's hesitation told me everything. Since college, he finally admitted. My trust fund disbursements started at 21, and so did my contributions. The implications hit me like a truck. So they've been taking money from you your entire adult life? And you just accepted that? That's how it works in this family, he said, a note of frustration entering his voice. Everyone contributes according to their means. Dad pays into it too, and Mom. But they're rich. And I'm not. I can't afford this, Ethan. My salary barely covers my living expenses and student loans as it is. We'll figure it out, he said vaguely. Maybe you could pick up some weekend clients, or we could adjust our budget. I stared at him, truly seeing him for perhaps the first time. You're actually okay with this? With them demanding money from me, assigning me chores like I'm a teenager being punished. They're not chores, he protested. They're family responsibilities. And it's not always going to be 3,000. It's percentage-based. Right now that's 15% of your income. 15%? I sank into a chair by the window. That's more than I put in my retirement account. And for what? The privilege of walking a dog that isn't mine and attending charity events I have no interest in? Ethan's face hardened slightly. This is my family, Morgan. This is how things have always been done. I've made sacrifices too. Like what? I challenged. Like taking a job at Harrison Tech instead of the startup I wanted to join. Like living in Boston when I would have preferred Seattle. Like attending every family dinner and event for the past 10 years without complaint. I softened slightly at this. That's my point, Ethan. They control you through money and obligation. Don't you want our life together to be different? It's not control, he insisted, though his eyes said otherwise. It's tradition. Structure. Did Bradley's wife leave because of this system? I asked suddenly, remembering the pain in his eyes when Miranda was mentioned. Ethan looked away. Partly. She couldn't adapt to the family expectations. She wanted Bradley to break away, start fresh somewhere else. And he chose the family over her, I concluded. Ethan's silence confirmed it. I need some air, I said, grabbing my jacket. I'm going for a walk. Winston needs his afternoon exercise, Ethan said without thinking. You could take him. I gave him an incredulous look. I'm not on the payroll yet. Outside, the expansive grounds of the Harrison estate felt more oppressive than impressive now. I followed a stone path away from the main house, trying to sort through my jumbled thoughts. The future I'd imagined with Ethan, cozy evenings in our apartment, weekend hikes, eventually children who would grow up knowing they were loved unconditionally, seemed to be evaporating before my eyes. Careful of the rose garden, a voice called out. Mrs. Harrison doesn't like people walking near it. I turned to see an older man in work clothes pruning a hedge. Thanks for the warning, I said. He studied me for a moment. You must be Ethan's fiancé. Morgan, I confirmed. Jim, he introduced himself with a nod. I've been tending these grounds for 30 years. Seen a lot of people come and go. Something in his tone made me pause. Including other fiancés? I asked carefully. Jim turned his attention back to the hedge. Bradley brought home a few before Miranda. Nice girls, all of them. None lasted past the family orientation. The family contribution system, I said grimly. He nodded. That's what they call it nowadays. Used to be more straightforward, the old man just told you what he expected and that was that. Have any of them ever refused? Pushed back against these demands? Jim clipped another branch before answering. Only one that I recall. Richard's brother's wife, Charlotte. Strong-willed woman. Said she and Edward would contribute on their own terms or not at all. What happened to them? I asked, almost afraid to hear the answer. Disinherited, Jim said matter-of-factly. Cut off completely. They moved to Oregon, I believe. Haven't been mentioned in this house for 20 years. A mixture of dread and determination settled in my stomach. I thanked Jim and continued walking, eventually finding a bench near a small ornamental pond. I pulled out my phone and was surprised to see several messages from friends. Rachel, how's it going with the in-laws? Are they royalty like you joked? Tessa, send pics of the mansion. Is it as fancy as Ethan made it sound? Daniel, just checking in. Hope they're treating you well. I didn't know how to respond. How could I explain this bizarre situation to friends with normal families? That I was being presented with a bill for joining this dynasty? That my future husband seemed to think this was perfectly reasonable? I finally texted Rachel, my oldest friend, call you tonight. It's complicated. Her response was immediate, that bad, huh? I'm here when you need me. As I walked back toward the house, I noticed Ethan watching for me from a window, his expression anxious. Despite everything, my heart still softened at the sight of him. I loved him, his kindness, his humor, his steadiness. But for the first time, I was seeing the strings that had been pulling at him his entire life, and I wondered if he would ever truly be free of them. More importantly, I wondered if he even wanted to be. Dinner that evening was excruciating. Stephanie had invited two couples, friends of the family who were clearly part of their social circle. I was seated between a cardiothoracic surgeon and his wife, who kept asking questions about what it was like to work with your hands all day, as if physical therapy were akin to digging ditches. Throughout the meal, Richard and Stephanie referenced the orientation as if I had already agreed to their terms. Morgan will be taking over Winston's exercise routine starting tomorrow, Stephanie informed one of the guests. She has such an affinity for him already. I caught Ethan's eye across the table, but he quickly looked away. We're also hoping Morgan might lend her expertise to the annual charity gala, Richard added. Her healthcare background would be valuable for the Children's Hospital fundraiser. Oh, how wonderful, the surgeon's wife exclaimed. Are you on the planning committee already? Not yet, I said carefully. We're still discussing what my involvement will be. Stephanie's smile tightened almost imperceptibly. Morgan is being modest. She's very excited to take on her Harrison responsibilities. The conversation continued in this vein, with Richard and Stephanie essentially programming my future without my input. Bradley drank steadily throughout dinner, while Allison contributed the minimum required to appear engaged. Ethan remained unusually quiet, nodding along with his parents' pronouncements. After dinner, the men retreated to Richard's study for brandy, while the women gathered in the sitting room. I excused myself to use the restroom but took a detour to our guest room, needing a moment alone. As I was about to enter, I noticed Ethan's suitcase partially open on the luggage rack. A corner of a document protruded from an inside pocket. I hesitated only briefly before pulling it out. The header read Harrison Family Prenuptial Agreement. I knew I shouldn't read it without Ethan present, but after the day's revelations, I felt entitled to know what else was being hidden from me. The document was extensive, at least 30 pages. I flipped through it quickly, my heart sinking further with each page. There were clauses about the family contribution system, detailed descriptions of expected behaviors, even specifications about how any future children would be raised and educated. Most alarmingly, there was a section titled Dissolution Provisions that stated in clear legal language that if I ever divorced Ethan, I would receive no financial settlement whatsoever regardless of the length of the marriage or any children we might have unless I had been a member in good standing of the Harrison family for at least 10 years. I was still holding the document when Ethan entered the room. Morgan, he said, then noticed what I was reading. His face fell. You weren't supposed to see that yet. Yet? I repeated, my voice dangerously calm. When exactly were you planning to show me this? The night before our wedding? Dad's lawyers are still finalizing it, he said, as if that were the issue. I was going to discuss it with you next week. Along with all the other things you've been meaning to tell me? I waved the prenup. This isn't just about money, Ethan. This is about control. They're trying to trap us in this system forever. It's just protection, he argued weakly. All wealthy families have prenups. This isn't a prenup. It's a life sentence. I tossed the document onto the bed. How can you be okay with this? With your parents dictating every aspect of our future? Ethan ran both hands through his hair, a sign of extreme stress I recognized well. You don't understand. This is how it's always been. I've been part of this system my entire life. That's exactly the problem. I exclaimed. You can't even see how dysfunctional it is because you're so used to it. They've had you paying them since you were 21? That's financial abuse, Ethan. It's not abuse, he protested. It's commitment to the family. Responsibility. It's control through money. Why do your wealthy parents need your money? Why do they need mine? It's not about the money, it's about making sure you remain dependent on their approval. Ethan's face flushed. You're overreacting. Plenty of families have expectations and traditions. Traditions like making your children pay for the privilege of being your children? Traditions like dictating who walks the dog and when? Traditions like forcing your son to take a job he doesn't want. I was almost shouting now, months of confusion and weeks of anxiety finally boiling over. Lower your voice, Ethan hissed. Everyone will hear you. I don't care. I said, though I did lower my volume slightly. I need you to see what's happening here. Your parents have controlled you your entire life through this so-called system, and now they want to control me too. They want to control our children before they're even conceived. Ethan's shoulders slumped. He sat heavily on the edge of the bed, suddenly looking exhausted. What do you want me to do, Morgan? This is my family. This is who they are. I want you to choose us, you and me, over their control, I said, sitting beside him and taking his hand. We can be part of your family without surrendering our independence. Without paying them for the privilege of being related to them. A soft knock at the door interrupted us. Allison stood there, looking uncomfortable. Sorry, she said. Mom's wondering where you are, Morgan. The dessert is being served. I'll be right there, I said, not moving. Allison lingered. I heard some of that, she admitted. Can I come in? I nodded, and she closed the door behind her. You should listen to her, Ethan, she said quietly. Morgan's right about all of this. Ethan looked at his sister in surprise. You've never complained about the system. Because it's easier not to, she said with a bitter smile. But that doesn't make it right. She turned to me. Bradley's wife, Miranda, she was like you. She saw through it all and tried to get Bradley to break away. But he couldn't do it. He was too afraid of being cut off. Financially? I asked. In every way, Allison clarified. Mom and Dad don't just withdraw money when you displease them. They withdraw love, approval, family connection, everything. So that's my choice? Ethan asked hollowly. Submit to the system or lose my family? That's the choice they're giving you, I corrected gently. But it's a false one. Real family doesn't come with a price tag. Easy for you to say, he snapped, then immediately looked contrite. I'm sorry. That was unfair. No, it wasn't, I admitted. I don't have family to lose anymore. That's why I've been so excited to join yours. But not like this, Ethan. Not as an employee or an asset. A longer silence fell between us. Allison fidgeted with her watch. We should go back downstairs before they send a search party, she finally said. As we returned to the sitting room, I caught Ethan's arm. Think about what you really want, I whispered. Not what they've taught you to want. Later that night, I called Rachel from the bathroom, speaking in hushed tones with the shower running to muffle the sound. They want you to pay what? She exclaimed when I explained the situation. $3,000 a month, I repeated. Plus dog walking and charity work and mandatory dinners. That's insane, Rachel said flatly. You know that's insane, right? It feels insane, I agreed. But Ethan's been living with this his whole life. He can't see how messed up it is. What are you going to do? She asked. I stared at my reflection in the bathroom mirror, seeing determination harden in my eyes. I'm going to fight, I said. Not just for me, but for Ethan too. He deserves better than this. And if he won't fight with you? Rachel asked gently. The question hit me like a physical blow. Then I'll have my answer about our future, I said, my voice breaking slightly. Won't I? I barely slept that night, my mind racing with thoughts, fears, and eventually, plans. By dawn, I knew what I needed to do. I slipped out of bed, careful not to wake Ethan, and set up my laptop on the small desk in our guest room. For the next 2 hours, I created what I called my family values proposal, a clear, professional counterproposal to the Harrison family contribution system. I outlined what I believed a healthy family relationship should look like, including voluntary contributions to family gatherings and events based on availability and interest. Financial independence for each family unit, Ethan and I, Bradley, Allison. Respect for individual career choices and personal time. A family emergency fund that everyone could contribute to according to their means, but with transparent governance. Quarterly family meetings where everyone had an equal voice. I also detailed the non-financial ways I would be happy to contribute to the family. Offering my physical therapy expertise for family health concerns. Participating in family traditions that fostered genuine connection. Supporting charitable causes that aligned with my values. Building relationships based on mutual respect rather than obligation. By the time Ethan stirred, I had printed out copies of my proposal and felt a strange calm. This was my line in the sand. However they responded would tell me everything I needed to know about my future with this family. "What's that?" Ethan asked groggily, noticing the stack of papers. "My answer to your parents," I said, handing him a copy. "Read it while I shower." When I emerged from the bathroom, Ethan was sitting on the edge of the bed, my proposal in his hands, his expression unreadable. "Well?" I prompted. "It's reasonable," he said slowly. "But they won't accept it. They'll see it as a rejection of everything they stand for." "Maybe," I acknowledged. "Or maybe they'll recognize that families evolve, and that healthy boundaries make for stronger relationships." "You don't know them like I do," Ethan warned. "No, I don't," I agreed. "But I know you. And I know you deserve better than being controlled through guilt and financial obligation." I sat beside him, taking his hand. "I love you, Ethan. I want to marry you and build a life with you. But I need to know if you're marrying me or if you're adding me to your parents' collection." His flinch told me the words had hit home. "That's not fair." "None of this is fair," I said gently. "But it's where we are. I've asked Stephanie and Richard for a family meeting this morning. I'm presenting this to everyone." Fear flashed across his face. "Morgan, don't. Please. Let's just accept their terms and figure it out later." I shook my head. "I can't start our marriage with a lie. I won't pretend to accept something that I believe is harmful to me, to you, to any children we might have someday." "What if they say no?" he asked, his voice small. The question hung between us, heavy with implication. "Then I'll know they value control more than they value your happiness," I said. "And you'll have to decide what you value most." Breakfast was a tense affair. I requested the family meeting for 10 o'clock, and Richard agreed with a confidence that suggested he expected me to capitulate to their demands. At precisely 10, we gathered in Richard's study, Richard behind his imposing desk, Stephanie standing beside him, Ethan, Bradley, Allison, and me in the chairs arranged before them like supplicants before a tribunal. "I understand you've had time to consider our family structure," Richard began. "Sandra has prepared the necessary documents for your first contribution." "Actually," I said, my voice steadier than I felt, "I prepared something I'd like to share with all of you first." I distributed copies of my proposal to everyone in the room. Richard's expression darkened as he scanned the first page. "What is this?" "My vision for how I can contribute meaningfully to this family," I explained. "Not through mandatory financial payments, but through genuine relationship and mutual respect." "This is not how the Harrison family operates," Stephanie said coldly. "Perhaps it should be," I suggested. "The current system seems to be creating obligation rather than connection. Fear rather than love." "That's absurd," Richard dismissed. "This system has preserved our family legacy for generations." "At what cost?" I asked, looking around the room. Bradley's marriage? Allison's independence? Ethan's career dreams? Bradley's eyes widened, while Allison studied her hands. Ethan sat rigid beside me, his breathing shallow. "You know nothing about our family dynamics," Stephanie said. "You've been here 2 days." "I know that I love Ethan," I said simply. "And I know that love shouldn't come with a price tag." Richard's face flushed with anger. "This is completely unacceptable. The family contribution system is non-negotiable." "Then I'm afraid I can't agree to it," I said, my heart pounding but my resolve firm. "I won't enter a marriage where financial obligation replaces emotional connection. Where my worth is measured by my bank account rather than my character." "If that's your position, perhaps you should reconsider whether you belong in this family at all," Richard said coldly. The silence that followed was deafening. This was the moment of truth, not just for me, but for Ethan. I held my breath, waiting for him to speak. Dad, he finally said, his voice quiet but clear. Morgan isn't wrong. Richard's head snapped toward his son. What did you say? I said she's not wrong, Ethan repeated, stronger now. I've been paying into this system for 8 years without question. I took a job I didn't want. I've attended every dinner, every event, every meeting. I've done everything you've asked of me. His voice broke slightly. And I'm not sure it's made me happy. Or any of us happy. Bradley straightened in his chair. He's right, Dad. This system, it cost me my marriage. Miranda left because she couldn't breathe in this family. Because every decision we made had to go through you first. That's ridiculous, Stephanie protested. Miranda simply wasn't committed enough to this family. No, Mom, Allison spoke up, surprising everyone. Miranda saw what the rest of us couldn't, that this isn't normal. That family shouldn't feel like a corporation with shareholders and dividends. Richard stood abruptly, his face rigid with anger. This is outrageous. You've been a part of this family for 5 minutes, he said to me, and you've already poisoned my children against traditions that have sustained us for generations. I haven't poisoned anyone, I said calmly. I've simply asked questions that maybe should have been asked long ago. If you can't accept our family's values, then perhaps this engagement was premature, Stephanie suggested icily. The ultimatum hung in the air. I nodded slowly, accepting the challenge. Perhaps it was, I agreed, rising from my chair. I looked at Ethan, my heart breaking at the thought of walking away from him, but unwilling to compromise my self-respect. I love you, Ethan. But I won't be purchased, controlled, or diminished, not even for you. I walked toward the door with as much dignity as I could muster, unsure if I was ending my relationship or simply calling their bluff. The uncertainty made every step painful, but I knew with absolute clarity that I couldn't build a healthy marriage on their dysfunctional foundation. I had my hand on the doorknob when I heard the scrape of a chair behind me. Morgan, wait. Ethan's voice. I turned, hardly daring to hope. I'm coming with you, Ethan said, standing up. His face was pale but determined. Ethan, Richard warned. Think carefully about what you're doing. I have thought about it, Dad, Ethan replied. For the first time in years, I'm really thinking for myself. He walked over to join me by the door, taking my hand. Morgan's right. This system isn't about family, it's about control. And I'm done being controlled. Richard's face reddened. If you leave this room with her, you'll regret it. Your position at Harrison Tech, your trust fund, your place in this family, all of it will be reconsidered. Are you threatening to disown your own son? I asked, genuinely shocked despite everything. I'm explaining consequences, Richard corrected coldly. Actions have consequences. Ethan squeezed my hand. So does treating your children like assets instead of people. We walked out together, neither of us looking back. In the grand foyer, Ethan grabbed his car keys from the silver tray where they'd been placed upon our arrival. I'm sorry, he said as we hurried toward his car. I'm so sorry I didn't see it sooner. You're seeing it now, I said, tears of relief threatening. That's what matters. As we pulled out of the long driveway, I caught a glimpse of Bradley and Allison watching from a window. I raised my hand in a small wave, and to my surprise, they both waved back. The first hour of our drive home was silent, both of us processing the enormity of what had just happened. Finally, Ethan pulled into a rest stop and turned to face me. I've been blind, he said simply. They've controlled me my entire life, and I never questioned it because it was all I knew. It took you seeing it with fresh eyes to make me understand. What happens now? I asked, almost afraid to hear the answer. Your job, your family. I don't know, he admitted. Dad might follow through on his threats. Or he might calm down and reconsider. Either way, we'll figure it out together. He took my hands in his. If you still want there to be in US. I do, I said without hesitation. I just don't want us to be owned. He nodded. No more family contributions. No more mandatory dinners or dictated life choices. We'll build our own traditions, based on love and respect, not obligation and control. Over the following weeks, Ethan faced the consequences of his decision. Richard did remove him from his position at Harrison Tech, but Ethan found this unexpectedly liberating. He reached out to contacts at the startup he'd originally wanted to join and secured a position that excited him far more than his previous job ever had. His trust fund was indeed frozen, but as Ethan pointed out, at least I'm not paying them $5,000 a month anymore. We're actually financially better off. To my surprise, it was Bradley who reached out first, calling Ethan about 2 weeks after our dramatic departure. "Dad's furious," he reported. "But Mom's worried. And I think you might have started something, Morgan." Gradually, we learned that our stand had created ripples within the family. Bradley had stopped making his contributions and was reconnecting with Miranda. Allison had moved out of the family's secondary property and into her own apartment, reducing her involvement in the family foundation to a level she felt comfortable with. Ethan began seeing a therapist to work through the complex feelings of guilt, relief, anger, and loss that came with setting boundaries with his parents. At his therapist's suggestion, he wrote Richard and Stephanie a letter, not apologizing for his decision but explaining his hope for a healthier relationship moving forward. "I love you both," he wrote. "And I want you in my life. But as parents and family, not as employers or owners." 3 weeks before our wedding date, we received a surprising phone call. It was Stephanie, asking if she and Richard could meet with us. We agreed, choosing a neutral location, a private room at a restaurant halfway between our apartment and their estate. The meeting was tense at first. Richard was clearly uncomfortable, and used to being in a position where he didn't hold all the power. But Stephanie, to my surprise, had come prepared. "We've been doing some reflection," she said carefully. "And some reading about family dynamics and boundaries." She glanced at Richard, who nodded stiffly. "We don't want to lose you, Ethan. Or you, Morgan." "We don't want that either," I said genuinely. "But we need to be clear about what kind of relationship we can have." Richard cleared his throat. "The family contribution system has been a Harrison tradition for generations," he began. My heart sank. They hadn't changed at all. "But," he continued with visible effort, "perhaps it's time for that tradition to evolve." Over lunch, we discussed what a new kind of family relationship could look like. There would be no mandatory financial contributions, though they hoped we would participate in family gatherings when possible. The prenuptial agreement would be standard, focused on protecting family heirlooms and pre-existing assets, not on controlling our future behavior. "And Winston?" I couldn't help asking. "Who will walk him now?" A ghost of a smile crossed Stephanie's face. "We've hired a professional dog walker. Apparently, that's what normal people do." Our wedding was smaller than originally planned. We'd cancelled the lavish affair at the Harrison estate in favor of a more intimate gathering at a boutique hotel. To my surprise and Ethan's joy, all the Harrisons attended, even Richard, who gave a stiff but sincere toast to our happiness. Bradley brought Miranda as his date, their reconciliation tentative but hopeful. Allison seemed lighter somehow, more authentic in her interactions without the weight of family expectations pressing down on her. As we prepared to leave for our honeymoon, Stephanie pulled me aside. "You've changed our family," she said quietly. "It's uncomfortable and difficult and, probably long overdue." She hesitated, then added, "Thank you for loving my son enough to fight for him. For all of us, really. It hasn't been perfectly smooth sailing since then. Old habits die hard, and the Harrisons occasionally slip back into their controlling patterns. Ethan sometimes struggles with guilt when he sets boundaries. We've had to define and redefine what healthy family involvement looks like for us. But we're building something new and authentic together, not just Ethan and I, but the entire Harrison family. A relationship based on choice rather than obligation, on love rather than transactions. I've learned that true family isn't measured by what you contribute financially, but by how you show up for each other emotionally. That standing up for yourself doesn't necessarily mean losing the people you love, sometimes it means giving them the opportunity to rise to the occasion and grow alongside you. Most importantly, I've learned that the foundation of any lasting relationship, whether romantic, familial, or friendly, must be built on mutual respect, honest communication, and genuine care for each other's well-being. So if you're facing your own version of a $3,000 family bill or impossible expectations, remember that you have the right to define what family means to you. You have the right to be valued for who you are, not what you can provide. And sometimes, drawing that line in the sand is the most loving thing you can do, not just for yourself, but for everyone involved. What boundaries have you had to set with family members? Share your experiences in the comments below. And if this story resonated with you, please like and subscribe for more real-life relationship journeys. Thank you for listening, and remember, you deserve relationships that lift you up, not drain you dry.